Alliance unveiled 23 general election candidates today and promised to support any government who implement their Charter for Change. Any of the group's successful candidates will remain as independents in the next Dáil, but they will support a government en bloc if there's agreement on what they're calling core principles. However, there's disagreement in the group about support for Sinn Féin. Now, Fergal Keane went along today to this launch. A Charter for Change, Fergal, is what they're calling it. No party leader.
No, and
no party, really.
No party. It is not a political party. They say it's an alliance of different independents. And this Charter for Change, it's a document which all the candidates have signed up to, and it was unveiled today. It's fairly aspirational stuff. It doesn't have, I'll go through what it says in a moment. But today you had 23 candidates on the stage. Senator Fergal Quinn opening proceedings. That is 21 of the 23 will be standing for election in the general election. Fergal Quinn and Senator Jerry Craughwell will be standing for the Seanad. But Fergal Quinn opened proceedings. Shane Ross then gave the main address, and then several of the non-TD and senator members were asked to speak. They have 5 TDs and 2 senators. They'll be hoping that they can increase that fairly substantially because they have a number of councillors standing for them who've topped the polls in various areas. And the first thing, as you mentioned earlier, to say is that this is not a political party. All candidates will stay as independents after the election, but they've signed up for this Charter for Change, which has 10 demands. Now, that includes things like an end to cronyism, no more political appointments to state boards, the judiciary and other groups. An independent selection body will be set up instead to make these appointments. They want an end to the culture of insiders as seen in the IFA, Central Remedial Clinic and other groups like that. They want a far-reaching Oireachtas for reform, including the end of the guillotine. Then they say the needs for rural Ireland and small business should be made a priority, binding pacts to be signed with any government to ensure health services for the most needy, elderly and vulnerable, and they want a complete overhaul of the judicial and the justice system. Now, they would have no party whip, and neither do they have a party leader. Shane Ross, he says, is not party leader. And Shane Ross said that this issue of having no party whip would be a radical departure for Irish politics.
But we also have a platform of principles as embodied in the Charter today, which unites us. And the principal one of that, which is such a radical departure in Irish politics, is that we will have no party whip. And anybody who looks at this Charter and looks at what we were doing will recognise the fact that we are totally and utterly different from any other body or entity in Irish politics. We are doing something very adventurous, very new, but also, we believe, very practical. Because the issues which unite us are so important and represent something so radical in Irish politics that we believe we can make a serious and real change. We believe that we should be allowed a free vote on every issue. This is very, very radical. And that we should combine the freedom of thought with the freedom of speech and the freedom to say what we like and vote as we wish throughout the Dáil.
Shane Ross there. So, Fergal, what form would that support for government take if there's no whip, there's no party and there's no party whip?
No, and it is, and we've spoken to Shane Ross before, it's his ideal that the Dáil would operate almost, as a free group where people would come together, coalesce at various times to vote through various pieces of legislation. And that's his ideal on this, that this group wouldn't support every piece of government or legislation regardless of what they thought of it. Each TD would be free to vote as they wished, but if the government lost a vote, then the members of the Independent Alliance would all vote for the government in the ensuing vote of confidence. So, OK, there's a piece of legislation the government voted down, somebody calls a vote of confidence, the Independent Alliance are going to come in and vote for the government on that. Now, according to Shane Ross, this would not be a recipe for instability, and it would rather be stable government.
We will be happy, more than happy, if they implement substantially the programme that we put forward, to support them in votes of confidence. This is where the responsibility lies. We will keep them in government if they implement the radical proposals which we put to them on votes of confidence. That doesn't mean that we'll be giving them a blank cheque for their legislation. Far from it. The principle of the free vote will continue to apply to all legislation. But on votes of confidence, they can take it that they will be supported, so the instability argument doesn't wash. It will be a stable government, but it will have to implement legislation according to the wishes not of the Cabinet or the Economic Monetary Council, but according to the wishes of the Dáil. What an extraordinary concept.
Would they be looking for cabinet seats?
Yeah, in fact, they are looking for cabinet seats, but who that would be a subject to negotiation. The candidates were asked today by journalists who would like to be a cabinet minister. I think all of them, save one, didn't put up their hands. But the priorities for their charter would also have to be negotiated before they were going to support a government. By whom, as there's no party leader, that would also have to be decided by them. But the question remains at how stable a government like that could be. If they're not going to support everything regardless, then everything is up for negotiation, every piece of legislation. And there's a huge range of political opinion represented here, and it seems impossible that they would all agree, for example, on a budget. But according to Shane Ross today, each budget would be a matter for negotiation with the government each time. His ideal, as I mentioned, would be that the Dáil itself would dictate the legislation. There'd be coalitions coming and going all the time to get a piece of legislation through, not done at the request of the government whips. But because they represent such a wide range of political thinking, agreement could prove difficult on some things. Now, one of those is whether or not they would support Sinn Féin. We'll hear shortly what Shane Ross had to say on this, but Diarmuid O'Flynn, who is a candidate now in North Cork, who's joined them recently, he would not be opposed to joining Sinn Féin. But Shane Ross was asked about his opinion on whether or not the Independent Alliance would support Sinn Féin in government.
I think they'll know perfectly well, we've made it perfectly clear, that we intend, if we get in that position, to put down those principles which we've established and to negotiate on the basis of the Charter with democratically elected representatives. Sinn Féin, I think, are a special case. I have a personal view about Sinn Féin, which I think is shared by a number of my colleagues, and that is that Sinn Féin would have to have a Pauline conversion to democracy to convince us that they were suitable partners for us.
It's not a no, though, Fergal, is it?
Yeah, well, a Pauline conversion to democracy, what does that mean? Does that mean a complete overhaul of their party? I can't say, and he will,
Go any further.
But it was something which there is disagreement in, and we'll have to wait and see. They will have to wait and see whether or not they're going to support Sinn Féin in government. But he seems to be saying no.
All right, Labour had a